I have a roadblock which is preventing me from buying a Grand Seiko watch. I have several Seiko watches and have considered, reviewed, and admired a few Grand Seiko watches, yet I can't bring myself to purchasing one. Join me on this episode of Adventures with Time as I explore this eccentricity in somewhat of a self-intervention or self-reflection. This past Saturday, I attended the Watch Time Live session on Grand Seiko, where brand creator Joe Kirk discussed the latest activities around the brand's 60th anniversary. I made sure to attend this Grand Seiko session as I'm an admirer of how their work takes inspiration from nature and actually incorporates the beauty and elements of the landscape into their designs. Joe reviewed the new 2020 models, work on their new spring drive caliber 9R-A5, and the new 9S-A5 high beat mechanical caliber. He also discussed Grand Seiko's new concept movement, the TS0 Constant Force Tourbillon. As the name implies, this movement overcomes the age-old problem with spring drive movements where torque and hence accuracy diminish as the mainspring unwinds. This made me reflect on why I haven't purchased a Grand Seiko for my collection. I have several Seiko watches in my collection and I enjoy them. I could see buying several Seiko watches in the future given the vast selection available across their collection. However, I'm trying to keep the number of watches I have at an enjoyable amount. My first experience with Grand Seiko was during my search for a mid-tier luxury watch in October of 2019. I visited a local Grand Seiko AD to investigate the brand. Shortly after that, I traveled into New York City to the Grand Seiko boutique for a full survey of their current watches. I immediately fell in love with the SBGH 269, a limited edition of their heritage collection, reflective of autumn in the forests of Japan. Having traveled to Japan on business for a month back in the 1980s, I had time to visit several of the historic cities in Japan. The beautiful red plank dial on this watch reminded me of the lacquered wooden floors I saw during my travels. When I tried on this watch at the boutique, its 39.5mm case was a perfect fit for my wrist. The detailed finishing on the watch and the 9S85 movement made the watch very appealing to me. So why didn't I buy the watch? Yes, the price was $6,400 plus New York City sales tax, bringing the total to about $7,000. Although price was a factor, it wasn't the predominant factor. There have been other Grand Seiko watches they admired and considered, like the SBGN003 GMT. This watch retails for $3,200, half of what the SBGH 269 costs. And although it's a quartz watch, it uses the 9F86, which isn't like other quartz movements. Every element of this movement is a step above the ordinary quartz movement, from their homegrown quartz crystals to the instant date change mechanisms. But still, I couldn't purchase one. Certainly it isn't the quality of Grand Seiko. Grand Seiko has made many innovations and exhibits a high level of mechanical engineering. Just look at the TS0 Constant Force Tourbillon. Innovations like this are usually the sole domain of the top watchmakers. Grand Seiko watches have beautiful finishing. These are timepieces that any Swiss house would be proud to produce. I think it all comes down to the Seiko name. Yes, I know this isn't rational thought. Grand Seiko is worlds apart from the Seiko line. And here comes some of the self-analysis. I know what Grand Seiko represents in watchmaking. It is how others would perceive me spending $7,000 on what they thought of as a plain Seiko watch. Or is there some doubt in the back of my mind that Grand Seiko watches aren't that much better than Seiko watches? Given all the information I've reviewed about Grand Seiko and their watchmaking, I'm convinced that Grand Seiko is truly high-end watchmaking. So I think my problem is how I believe others will perceive my spending thousands of dollars on what they consider a Seiko watch. But why do I care what others think? On several videos I've made on watch collecting, I've advocated the philosophy of not buying a watch for anyone else but yourself. Don't try to please others, only please yourself. But for me, with Grand Seiko, this is proving easier to preach than implement. Undoubtedly, the SBGH 269 gave me the most impetus to buy a Grand Seiko, as it was a watch that ticked all of the boxes for me. Dial presence, dimensions, style, purpose. Nothing in the Grand Seiko collection has come as close to this watch in exciting me. Will I overcome this mental block against Grand Seiko? Will I ever purchase the SBGH 269, which would now have to be on the pre-owned market? Will there be another Grand Seiko watch that piques my interest enough to make me purchase? I don't know. I don't know if I can overcome this mental block, even though I rationally understand it doesn't make sense. Do you have similar feelings about Grand Seiko or with any other brand or specific watch? I'd like to hear your thoughts, and if and how you overcame these mental blocks. I think this is something that will interest and maybe benefit lots of other collectors. And for your further video pleasure, here's the video I made when considering Grand Seiko, and my playlist on looking for my first mid-tier luxury watch. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in my next video.